Okay, so we've added some platforms and my character can jump now. So let's fix our character art first and then we'll add some more stuff. So I'm gonna go to Piskel and I'm gonna go to my character art. And so in my original character sprite, I only have 4 frames. There's the idle animation and there's the walking animation. So we need to add a jumping animation. So I'm going to take the character design. I'm not sure which one of these it is, but I'm just going to guess it's this one. And I'm just going to drag this in here. Okay. And so when we're exporting our character art, we're going to replace this character.png. But we need to make sure, in order to not mess up our previous animations, we need to make sure that it has the same number of columns. So I'm going to add a couple more frames. So I'm just going to duplicate the first frame and drag it down here. And I'll just make a quick jump animation. So for the beginning of the jump animation, I'm going to just make the feet kind of go up in the air. When you make a jump animation or other types of animations, you may be tempted to actually physically move the center of the character, move the character up like this. That's not what we want to do. Remember that the game engine is moving the character. The art needs to stay centered in our frame. So the main character is gonna stay in the same place. I'm just gonna make a couple changes. So I'm gonna make the feet kind of go up in the air like this. And I have the wrong color. Let's just fill that in. And so I'll put the feet up like this. And maybe I'll move the eyes up a little bit. So I'll just go like that. Just keeping it very simple. And then for my next frame, I'll put the feet sort of back a little bit. So I'll put them back here. And so it's just a couple of frames, but it's going to make a little jumping up and then down animation. And I'll move our eyes down a little bit. So I'll go down like this. Okay. So it's just a couple frames. That's all I'm going to do. I'm going to make sure to save this so I can edit it later. So I'm going to save it into my downloads folder, and then I'll drag this over to my art folder. Let's just move this over here, and I'll just drag this in here. And then we need to export the PNG. So I'm going to go to export and go to PNG, and just make sure the number of columns is the same. In this case it is, so I don't have to change anything here. And then I also have to remember that I scaled the player up by 2. So I'm going to scale it up. If I forget, I can always re-export it, so it's not the end of the world. Okay, so I download the new character art, and I just want to replace this character sprite with the new one. So I'm just going to drag this over here and click replace. So that adds a couple sprites to the end of my sprite sheet, but everything else is the same. So the character animations that I already created are going to stay the same, but I'm going to add a couple more new ones. Or just one new one, actually. Okay, so let's add that in. So I'm going to go to my animated sprite 2D for my character. I already have the idle and the walk. And so now let's just add jump. This has to be with a capital J if you're using the player controller script. And let's also make sure, let's double check our project settings and make sure we have jump in our input map. Okay, so we have X or space for jump. So I'm going to click on my little waffle button and then go to sprites and choose my character sprite. And now I have a different number of columns and rows. So I have to match this, right? So I have 2 horizontal columns and I have 3 vertical rows. And so I'm just going to grab these 2 jumping frames. And the jump animation I don't want to loop. I just want it to play once because the jump just happens once. So I'll turn off the loop toggle here. And then I'm going to play that and see what it looks like. Okay, it's pretty fast, so I might want to slow it down a little bit. I can see how it works with the timing of the jump, but I can change the actual playback speed. So maybe I'll do like 2 frames per second instead of the default 5. And then I'll see how that looks, and then I can adjust if I need to. So let's play the scene. And so that's pretty good. It looks like the animation actually ends pretty much when it hits the ground. So that timing is pretty good. I might make it a little bit faster, so maybe we can do 2.5 frames per second. I think that'll be good. Okay, so I've got my jump animation. And the jump animation turns back and forth just like the regular walk animation. That looks good. Okay, so now let's add a couple things to our level. And I'm not going to design a full level in the demo because that would take a long time. But I'm just going to add a couple quick examples of the techniques that we talked about. So to get started, I'm going to start with a basic signposting technique. And for this, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a platform to the right of the player. And what this is basically going to tell the player is that's the direction that they need to go in. So I'm going to choose my platform's TileMap. And I'm going to use this like little side guy, and I'll put one right here, and create like a new little platform, and maybe I'll make this one a little bit smaller. And then another thing that I can use here is I can kind of measure out how far the player needs to jump to actually make this jump. And so that's another way that I can kind of introduce some game mechanics to the player, is by making the jump like, you know, either pretty doable or, you know, just on the edge of what the character can do. So if I see this little gap here, this is a form of signposting, even though it's not a literal sign. I basically, when I look at the level, there's nothing to the left and there's a platform to the right. So that tells me I need to go to the right. And so when I go to the right, I also kind of learn how far can I jump with one jump. And one thing to keep in mind as you're starting to design the level is your player has a bunch of parameters that you can play with. So for example, the player has a speed, which is how fast it moves. And it also has a jump force. And so if I increase the speed, let's say I double the speed to 200, now the player is going to move a lot faster, and it's also going to be able to jump a lot further. So now that I can jump farther, maybe I want to turn the jump force down. Maybe I want to make the jump force 300. And as I start to play with the game, I can get a sense of how far can the player jump, and then I might adjust the level to match that jump. Another thing that's useful when you're testing, if you go to the debug section and turn on collision shapes, this will actually show you where these collisions are happening. So you can see the circle collider for the player, and you can see the platform colliders as well. So if your collisions are happening in a weird way or it doesn't look right, you can turn on that debug option and it'll show you, you know, for example, when I fall off the edge, the player kind of like rolls off the edge a little bit. So he has like, as he starts to fall, he doesn't really have a chance to, jump at all. So maybe that tells me that I want to edit my tile map a little bit. So I could go to my platforms and go to my tile sets And with these two little edges, maybe I need more of an edge here. Maybe it's like a little more sloped like that. That might give my player a chance to... also, if you want to get rid of one of these, just use that one. So yeah, maybe I need to make this sloped out a little bit more. That'll give the player more of a chance to make it across. Oh, I messed up this one. Okay, so I just made a couple adjustments to the tile set, and now I can test this again and see how fast he falls off. So he starts to fall off, but he doesn't completely fall off, so that's what I wanted. He still has a chance to jump before he completely falls off. So we have a little bit of signposting. We're showing our player which direction to go in, and then maybe at this point we could have some branching. I could give the player a couple different options with the platforms. So let's bring up my TileMap editor again. And once we get here, maybe I'll put like some tiles up here and maybe some other tiles down here. And let's see if I can actually make it to those tiles. So now I kind of have an option, although I can't quite get there. So I might need something a little smaller. Maybe I'll, whoops. I'm gonna lock this so I don't move it again. Okay, with my platforms, I'll grab this tile and add another one here, and then maybe I'll put some up here or something like that. And so I'm kind of like giving the player some different options to explore, although I can't fit under here. So I'll have to play with the, oh, I need to be able to actually jump higher. I'll have to play with the spacing on this a little bit. Oh, now I'm stuck. Okay, so maybe I need my player collider to be a little smaller. I'm gonna turn off this snap and make this a little bit smaller. And move it down a little bit like that. So yeah, once you start adding stuff in, you're gonna want to play around with the settings a little bit. Okay, and I can't quite get up here, so I need a little more jump force. So let's reset the jump force to 400. Okay, that's better. Now I have a little bit more options. So maybe now I can add some platforms going in different directions and give my player some more options for where to go. So maybe I'll add... Okay, I'm gonna lock this too. Oh, I can't. Okay. Okay. I'll add some platforms up here. And maybe down here. And once we have like some other items, like things to collect and things to avoid, then some of these different directions will be a little more or less appealing. But we also are starting to figure out kind of the limitations. So I can't quite make this jump, so I need to either change the position of that platform, or I need to give the player more jumping power. So that's a couple examples, just a little signposting, kind of like showing the player which direction to go in just by designing to the right of the scene. It doesn't have to be the right. A lot of games start by going to the right, but you could go to the left, you could go up and down. You could play around with it. And then also starting to just give the player options of different things to explore. And then there's other parameters with the player. For example, by default, the player kind of like just moves exactly as far as you press the button, but you can turn on sliding, And so this means the player will slide a little bit farther than how far you've pressed. So this makes it a little more challenging because you can slide off the edge if you're not careful. And then you can change the friction amount. So the more friction, the less sliding. So if the friction is just like 10, this is going to look insane. But if I slide a little bit, I just keep sliding forever. If the friction is like 1,000, then I'll barely just slide a little bit. So there's different parameters you can play with to kind of play with the physics a little bit. There's a couple other things in here. You can set a double jump. So this gives you 2 jumps, pretty straightforward. So depending on the design of the game, you may want that or not. You can also have that set in some levels turn on or turn off. So you can change what's the setting on different levels. You can also turn on wall jump. So this way the player will be able to like jump off the side of a wall. So if you're on the edge of a wall, you can jump again. So that could be useful. It's easy to abuse. And then there's also, I don't know if this will work. We might need to add some other stuff, but there's a Y limit here. If you set that, it'll reset the player. So if I set this to like, maybe like 500, what this will do is if I go below a certain limit, it should reset it, but I might not have it set up right. Let's look at the code for a second. Oh, yeah, never mind. We have to set up some other stuff for that to work. So ignore that for now. We'll go over that later. Okay. So yeah, I think that's good to get started. And so you guys can just start kind of building out the level a little bit. For now, just kind of play around with it, figure out what kind of feels good and what you want the level to feel like. And we'll add, next week we'll work on adding some more components. So we'll add items to pick up, sort of like coins or lives in Mario. And we'll add enemies or obstacles to avoid. All right.